Our MPs are playing roulette with our lives because they just can't be asked to do their jobs anymore. In France, they've been tackling extremism head-on, strengthening their laws, expelling radical imams, closing extremist schools and mosques, cutting funding for Islamist charities. They had the balls to confront the failures of multiculturalism. They banned the veil in schools and in the civil service. They tried to force integration. Here, our civil service sends all staff emails about World Hijab Day, whilst a dodgy asylum seeker who doused a woman and child with acid was still on the loose. And a video emerged yesterday as well, showing, well, frankly, that they'd all just given up, didn't they? A civil servant out on the stump for George Galloway. Rishi Sunak's solution is to change the definition of extremism, come up with a framework and try to appease people by getting Jeremy Hunt to open the budget with a statue for Muslim war veterans. We have record levels of mass migration that is ripping this country apart, socially crippling us financially. We have a housing crisis that requires something radical in order to sort it. We have record NHS waiting lists. We need new hospitals. What we've been given is pharmacists essentially doing GP appointments. We don't have enough schools. As it stands, 1 in 5 schools are full or have more children than they're supposed to. What are we doing about that? Nothing. Jeremy Hunt unveils a Labour budget written by the OBR. He designed a budget singularly around let's not do anything controversial, instead of what will help people's lives or get votes. Now, I found that baffling initially, but then last night I realised what's happening. They've stopped caring. They don't want to do what it takes to sort any of this stuff out because all they're bothered about now is protecting their legacy on the dinner party circuit. Theresa May is the latest rat to jump off the sinking ship. She won't be running for re-election. She joins 58 other Conservative MPs, I think it is now, it might have gone up in the last few minutes, 4 ex-Conservative MPs, 1 former SNP MP who now sits with the Conservatives, and 5 Conservative MPs who have said that they won't stand for re-election in their current seat, but might give it a go somewhere else. So I think I make that now 69 MPs in total from our ruling party, basically, are off. Sajid Javid, not content with getting his £1 million statue for Muslim war veterans, said something unbelievable last night. He essentially endorsed Sir Keir Starmer. He said, if I woke up the day after the election and Keir Starmer was standing outside 10 Downing Street, I'm not going to be frightened, right? I would have been if it had been Corbyn. There are actually very strong rumours about Chancellor Jeremy Hunt not standing at the next election. He denies them. Paul Scully mentions no-go zones, issues a grovelling apology, and then he says he's quitting. Tory party donations have dropped by a third. They are down to 18% in the opinion polls, and about 60 of them have literally told us that they don't want to do their jobs anymore. They would rather that you and I live with massive societal problems and the constant threat of Islamism than work hard to sort it out. They are too afraid of protecting their reputations to do anything. The reality is, though, they haven't got a reputation to protect. Let's get the thoughts of my panel. This evening I am joined by former BBC chief political correspondent, it's John Sargent, director, Popular Conservatives, it's Mark Littlewood, and, of course, entrepreneur and apprentice finalist, Joanna Jarju. Mark, I'll start with you on this. Why can't they be asked anymore to keep us safe and sort this country out?
Well, you know, hang on a second, Patrick. Let's do a little bit of maths here. These people are public servants, you might argue, but they're not indentured slaves, right? This is, I think, I've just done the maths here, this is about 1 in 5 Conservative MPs standing down at the moment. It will go a lot higher than that, by the way. But that seems to me about a natural rate of attrition, right? You'd probably expect people to serve, I don't know, 4 or 5 terms and then step down. It seems to me in Theresa May's case, perfectly sensible. She wants to do something else with her life. She's, I think, performed pretty well in Parliament since standing down as Prime Minister.
Do you think they're going to be energised, Mark, to sort out any of the kind of things that we've actually got going on right now? By the time that Rishi Sunak's extremism framework works itself through, how many more hundreds of Jews are going to be appallingly abused?
No, you're right. Listen, Patrick, I share your disappointment about the budget as well. This, I mean, I'm a supporter of the Conservative Party, but sometimes you get the feeling that whilst the wheel is turning, the hamster is dead. And there doesn't seem to be any, imaginative thought. The budget was very, very small ball, a couple of baubles in it that I quite liked. But in terms of the overarching problems facing Britain, I sometimes fear the government hasn't got a grip on them to speak of.
Yeah, John, I was wondering last night when Theresa May became the latest one to jump off, and like I said, by the time this show's out, there'll probably be a few others. Actually, whether or not we should just have a general election. It does seem to me as though that they clearly have not got it in them to do any of the kind of radical things that we need doing now.
Well, it depends who you ask. If you were to ask you, for example, what your view of radical is completely different from mine, and it's not necessarily, excuse me, a representation of everybody. But I think the problem with the Tories is that a lot of them are actually career politicians. And when the ship starts sinking, that's when they basically dip. And you just can see that. There's a lot of greed, there's a lot of, sleaze that we've seen. And now that they see that their success rate isn't likely to actually get to what it has been previously, they're ready to basically jump ship. And I'm not surprised about Theresa May. At the end of the day, she's close to retirement age. But also at the same time, I think Theresa May in her career has learnt a lot of lessons after the hostile environment. And even now, I think the whole Rwanda thing has probably triggered her quite a bit. And obviously she's been quite outspoken about that in the House of Commons about, risks to trafficking victims and things like that. So I think now she's probably just disgusted at the party that she once loved.
A lot of people, though, John, looking around, it's not just about the Islamist threat. We've got a housing crisis that does need something radical doing, whether it's the reform of planning laws or whether it's someone having the bottle to just stand up and go, right, look, we are building this amount of houses every single year. This is that. Schools, the things like, 1 in 5 primary schools now are at capacity or over capacity. Where are my kids going to go to school? Well, I should think where my grandkids are going to go to school. There isn't instead, they're just going, you know what? I'm not going to do anything controversial for the next few months because I'm not going to be here again and I don't want to end up accidentally putting my foot in it. And I think that's a dereliction of duty.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much that. I think after 14 years, you get through a complete cycle of people, and you get through another cycle of people who appear to have talent and then tested in office. Then for one reason or another, they fail. And after a bit, after 14 years of creating new governments, new ideas, and all the rest of it, don't be surprised if they look exhausted and they appear exhausted and they do boring things because they've gone through all the possibilities of should we try this, should we try that. And you do need new blood, you need new talent, but also what you can't do with these old fogies, you can't say, you must stay at your post. No, go. If you want to go, don't stay around here because there are lots of people who would love to come in and they would then have their heart set on going into government and doing something to change the country.
There are real world consequences for this, Mark, and you look at that budget and you think, what the nation needs, what people need now. If we've got a Chancellor whose main concern, as I suspect it is, was standing at that dispatch box and just not spooking the horses, let's not do anything, let's just get through this, I don't want much controversy, that's not actually what the country needs.
No, you're right, and you mentioned in your remarks, Patrick, and I know you did it slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I think only slightly tongue-in-cheek, the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, now effectively writes the budget. I don't want to overstate that, but it sets margins within which the Chancellor operates about how much fiscal headroom he has. It's almost as if the OBR's sort of doshing out pocket money to Jeremy Hunt and he's then deciding how to spend it. And although you can see the temptation to want an independent watchdog rather than politicians marking their own homework, I'd like there to be much more discretion for the Chancellor of the Exchequer. These forecasts, even if well-intentioned, are often miles out by tens of billions of pounds. I think the responsibility should sit on the shoulders of an elected politician, not a bureaucrat.
No, but look at what happened last time. It was in the hands of somebody like Kwasi Kwarteng, and look at what he did, and this is why
he paid the penalty for that. He was sacked.
Yeah, he was sacked. Okay,
so if it goes wrong, the politician goes.
Yeah, but he lost his job, all right, but I'm sure he's absolutely fine. He's doing much better than the people who can't afford their mortgages at the moment. But this is the same argument that people have when they talk about the Bank of England, saying the Bank of England has too much power. But the Bank of England should be independent and should be separate from the government.
The Bank of England is essentially unsackable.
I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that the Bank of England is kind of above being criticised, but at the same time, I would not put it, and it doesn't matter left or right, I would not put it in a politician's hands to be able to...
Yeah. I mean, the problem is that as far as the economy is concerned, it's going to take time. It doesn't matter how clever you are, what words you use. This is just after an extremely difficult period, particularly because of the pandemic. Now, this is equivalent to a war. It's a real sort of, you throw all the money you can at it because nobody knows quite what to do. So all sorts of mistakes are made, but the key thing is a lot of money was spent, and that has to be paid for. Now, if you're a young person coming into politics, you can say, well, you know, the wheel will turn, the recession will end, we'll get back on the front foot, we'll be able to do X, Y, and Z. The older people just think, oh, whatever happens, we've got 3 or 4 more years of austerity.
Yeah, but
not much fun.
Mark, just final word on this. I started that monologue there by talking about the fact that the French are now laughing at us over the way that we are handling these protests, over the way that we're handling multiculturalism, and the way that we're handling Islamism in this country. And from what I can see right now, in fact, what we can all see, I think, is people who fundamentally do not have the minerals to do that. And this is where the dinner party circuit comes in for me. If they know they've only got a few months left in office, let's not do anything too controversial. Let's just have a statue over here for £1 million or something. Let's have
Trump.
But that is controversial, Patrick.
Let's do that. But it needs someone with a bit of bottle. We're all living in this.
But the strange thing here, and I say this as a member of the Conservative Party, is this, isn't it? That seems to me a sensible electoral strategy if you're the government 6 months from a general election and 15% ahead in the opinion polls. You would have thought if you're at 18% in today's opinion polls that the sensible electoral thing to do, even putting aside the right thing for the country, would be to gamble a bit. There doesn't seem to be much to lose. So steady as she goes is a pretty odd strategy.
This is what I'm saying.
No, it's we're trapped is more the feeling of there's not much we
can do, yeah.
And more a feeling of just we need more time to cope with this. This is what happens. There are cycles. There are cycles.
I think it's...
You can't just beat the system and
that's
say,
true.
what we're going to do is borrow like crazy, spend like crazy. It doesn't work.
The social stuff, you can do the social stuff, and I think they don't want to do that because they know they're going to be out of office and they don't want to get any backlash in the meantime.